Hello, everyone, and welcome to another review of a Star Wars TV show. Today, we're taking a look at the first two episodes of Ahsoka, one of my most anticipated shows of this year. So, this is pretty much season 5 of Rebels, isn't it? Which is not a bad thing at all. I've been really excited with most of the information that's come out about this show. I say most. I'll get to why most, not all, in a little bit. But when it became clear that this was going to be a sequel to Rebels and, continuing where that show left off, was very excited because I adored Rebels. I liked it from basically where to go. It had the unfortunate position of coming out at an awkward time for Star Wars television because Clone Wars had been canceled by Disney right after the buyout, and that was at a point when Clone Wars was really maturing. Everyone points to like season 3 onward being when the show gets a lot darker and a lot more mature and growing with its audience a lot. Even though it had some of those moments sprinkled in the first 2 seasons, but where we left off with Clone Wars of Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order and being framed, and then season 6 having, and then being released on Netflix and having the Order's arc with the inhibitor chips being introduced, and Night Sisters and death and destruction and all, and it's and a lot of heavy concepts of what the Force is and morality and blah blah blah, all that stuff. It was going from that to then jumping to Rebels, which was more original trilogy camp rather than deep political and philosophical intrigue. It was a bit of a it was definitely a bit of a whiplash thing for several people. I feel like, and I think that's probably why you have a lot of people going, it's like, oh, the first season of Rebels isn't good at all. It's like, I disagree with that. I like the first season of Rebels at all. It's just a much different show from Clone Wars at the start. And I think that's okay because it's introducing us to these new characters, and we got to get a baseline for who these characters are before we can learn and grow with them and eventually get more mature stories out of this show. It's the same thing Clone Wars did. So I was never really on the Rebels isn't good until it is train. I was definitely like, oh, this show is good for it's just a different show. It's like it's almost impossible to compare it to Clone Wars, even though there is a lot of crossover with the two story wise, because it's different animation style, and it's a different era, and all this different stuff. So it's like but I really enjoyed Rebels, and also just the core cast. It's like it always stuck with this core cast. Where Clone Wars, it's like we might be with Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Anakin for 3 episodes in a row, and then we're going to spend 2 with R2 and 3PO as they go on this little jaunt across the galaxy for 2 episodes. So it's like, so Clone Wars bounced around all the time, where Rebels definitely stuck with its main cast throughout the entire run, which I think, for me at least, was appreciated, because it's like every time you tuned into an episode of Clone Wars, it was always kind of okay, who are we spending time with today? Most of the time, it was Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka and Rex and all that. But it's like, but again, like I said, every now and then you'd bounce around. It's like, oh, now we're gonna spend time with this guy named I'm a Gun Die on Ryloth, and Bail Organa and Jar Jar, and yeah, Obi-Wan's in it briefly at the beginning, but most of this, it's like it has, it's setting up the Ryloth arc from season 1. So yeah, we're bouncing around a little bit, but Rebels always stuck with Hera, Sabine, Chopper, Kanan, Ezra, Zeb, etc. So that was so it's like you always had that core cast there, which already makes it different from Clone Wars, because we always stuck with those characters. And I think that helped Rebels because it was a smaller, shorter show in its total episode run. So we really did, so like there wasn't a wasted moment in that show, I don't really think. I remember at the time a lot of people were calling episodes like the Purrgil. It's like, oh, that was a waste of 22 minutes. That had nothing to do with the plot. And then by the end of the show, it's like, oh, no, wait, that episode was like arguably one of the most important episodes of the show. It's like, how dare we call this filler? So yeah, I was a big fan of Rebels. I cried when it was over because I thought the ending was just so beautifully done, and I knew I was really going to miss those characters. And I have missed these characters for 60 years or however long it's been since since 2018. And so Ahsoka showing up in live action on Mandalorian and asking Morgan Elsbeth, it's like, where is Grand Admiral Thrawn? I mean, that was like that was like the thing that actually got me on board with like the storytelling they were moving forward with in that, because you can go back and listen to my review of that episode. I was very much like, Rosario Dawson was good as Ahsoka, but I'm still not quite sure I buy this completely. And even now I still kind of have my reservations about her, but yeah, just so we are going to get to Ezra and Thrawn and where the heck they went at the end of Rebels. We are moving in that direction. Okay, sweet. I'm on board with that, even if it is in live action. And so that's kind of, so this is a good segue into the why I've been happy with almost everything I've heard about this show prior to it coming out. The one thing that I was kind of scratching my head about, that I wasn't too big a fan of, but I think I've kind of come around on, is the fact that this show is in live action. Because I just kind of assumed, a couple years ago, that whenever we would get the Rebels follow-up, it would be animated. But then Mandalorian came out, and Dave Filoni's been working a lot basically exclusively in live action for the last couple of years, and he's kind of just helped steward and guide the animation team since. And so, and I think he's done a pretty good job. Resistance, kind of notwithstanding, because that was caught between a rock and a hard place of they did want to. It's like originally it was supposed to kind of be the Rebels for the sequel trilogy, but then they threw all their budget at season 7 of Clone Wars instead. So it kind of got the short end of the stick there. But Dave's definitely, you can see his influences on Bad Batch, and of course he's done Tales of the Jedi. So, but other than like kind of helping out there, well, no, I guess he was the lead creative behind Tales of the Jedi. So I guess technically, he's still done a little bit of animation, but the majority of his work lately has been in live action with Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, and now Ahsoka. So when I did hear that, Ahsoka is going to be continuing the Rebels plotline, I was like, so we're gonna recast like a whole, like the entire Rebels cast, I guess, then. And it didn't really sit well with me at first, because it's this weird kind of pick and choose. Like, there's some actors we'll bring back from animation and cast them as their live action selves again, but then in other cases we're gonna like do a totally different recast. And like Ahsoka, it's like, it's not Ashley Eckstein, it's Rosario Dawson. And I've talked about this before in my reviews, where it's like that's sort of kind of not really sat right with me. But I've thought about this a long time now, because it's been like 3 years since we got live action Ahsoka for the first time or something like that. Because it was 2020 when that episode came out, for Mando season 2. So I've thought about it a lot, and I've kind of finally, I think, come to terms with it. And also it's like, well, no, I guess this can kind of make sense depending on what the role entails. For Ahsoka, thinking about it now, I think it does actually make sense to recast. And that's clearly what they did. And I think part of the reason why it makes sense to recast is because for a role like Ahsoka, that is going to be, there's stunt doubles and stuff, but that's going to be a very physically challenging role to embody. And as amazing as Ashley Eckstein does with the voice of Ahsoka, that's one of those, well, maybe she doesn't have the physicality to pull off the part. And if that's the case, then yeah, you have to recast. It'd be like if Callus shows up in Ahsoka. It's not going to be his voice actor. mainly because, and I don't know how many people out there know this, but of course, the character of Callus is white, but his voice actor is black. So you would have to recast there for sure, unless you just decide to randomly race swap Callus, in between shows or something. And that was like, well, that definitely wouldn't make sense. And there are cases where I think it makes sense. So yeah, it was kind of a tough pill to swallow at first, but recasting Ahsoka as Rosario Dawson, she has much more physicality to her. I know she's done like martial arts, flips and stuff in other projects before, so she already has that down. She can do some of that stuff and then let the stunt people do whatever she can't do. So I think that it's just one of those, like, it's kind of a better fit. Where meanwhile with someone like Bo-Katan with shoot, I've forgotten her name all of a sudden. That's aggravating. But yeah, anyway, you know what I mean. Like the what's her face that plays Bo-Katan. It's like she clearly has a very physical presence to her, and she can do a lot of those stunts herself as well. So, because I think there's like a story where it's like on Mando season 3, she kept trying to do her own stunts, and the stunt coordinator was getting mad at her because it's like, no, you shouldn't be doing all these stunts. It's like, let the stunt people do them. And she's like, but I want to do them because I can do them. So clearly, it's something she's capable of doing, and so that's good. She fits the role in both voice and live action. So so that also brings us to the recast of Sabine and Ezra. And it's like those are both very physical parts, and I don't know if Tira Sakar or Taylor Gray really had that physicality to them to be able to do all that. And again, we don't really know how much Ezra's going to be doing in the show in terms of flips and tricks. It's like, I swear if like Ezra shows up in like the last 5 minutes of the season finale or whatever, and it's like, to be continued in season 2 or whatever, I'm going to flip a table or something. I don't think they're going to do that, but yeah, it is one of those, like, it makes sense. I don't necessarily like it all the time, but I think it makes sense. But even then, Dave does, keep cast members where it makes sense, clearly, because we're getting, Thrawn is being played by Lars Mikkelsen, who, of course, voiced him in Rebels. But it's like, Thrawn's not necessarily you have to do, a lot of flips and tricks. That's you stand there and look menacing, which Lars Mikkelsen can totally do. And he's done it before in other projects that I've seen him in, namely Sherlock. So it makes sense to keep him. Surprise cameos in episode 1 of Ahsoka is Clancy Brown returning as Ryder Azadi. That was really cool. I appreciated that. It makes total sense. So that was cool. And then and there was like they had Jai Kell in there as well. It's like that's honestly, Jai Kell is one of those Star Wars characters that's honestly a deep cut, I feel like, because he's in like 2 episodes of Rebels, if that. And then he got like the spin-off book series or whatever, where he goes looking for his sister. And it's like, okay, and those are like elementary level books. Those aren't like the big adult novels, adult level novels where it's like 500 pages or whatever. It's like, no, those are meant for 3rd graders. So it's like, so he's not a very prominent Star Wars character like at all. So for him to get thrown in there at the beginning, it's like, okay, that's cool. It's like it's a good on Dave. It's like, I mean, he was the creative director of Rebels or whatever, so he knows what characters would make sense to show up. So it was cool to see Clancy Brown as Ryder Azadi in the flesh. He looks the part. So I'll never say no to Clancy Brown showing up in anything. He's always a fun actor to watch or listen to, no matter the role. Wouldn't you? It's like, and he's got crazy range, because he can go from a character like Mr. Krabs in SpongeBob to what's his face in Daredevil, where he plays this crooked, not a crooked cop, but a crooked military guy that helps set up the Punisher. So it's like he's got a lot of range. So I'll always applaud whenever he shows up. It's like, hey, Clancy Brown, cool. And it's like he even showed up in The Mandalorian as that big Deveronian. So yeah. So all that, laying the base work, I was like, I've been really excited about this show. It's like I've kind of overcome the it's like, oh, this should be an animation, but but it is in live action, so I've kind of gotten over all of that. So with that out of the way, what do I think of these first two episodes? I think they're definitely good. It's a lot of exposition and a lot of setup, but I think it's done really well. And talking on recasting, might I just say that the girl that they've got to play Sabine is just perfect. Would I have preferred to Tia Sakar to reprise her role? Probably, but I think she's too short maybe to play it, or something like that. But this person that they've gotten to play Sabine is pretty much perfect. This is an older, grown up, more mature sort of kind of Sabine from what we saw in Rebels. And so it's seeing her walking around Ezra's tower, and hearing her theme play and everything, and feeding the Loth cat. It's like they've recreated Lothal and like all the Rebel stuff like perfectly, and I just love it. Hearing the dee 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 dee, it's like, oh gosh, because it's like because Sabine didn't really have her own theme for like the first two seasons, and then she finally gets her own theme in what's probably her standout episode, arguably one of the best episodes of the series, is Trials of the Darksaber. And so hearing that theme continued is really cool, and to see her, I was just getting all swept up in the emotion. It's like, okay, we're finally here, we're finally continuing this story arc and seeing kind of what some of what these characters have been up to, not completely, but a little bit about what they've been up to in the interim. So clearly Sabine does hold some sort of high position on Lothal, with like the guard force or something like that. I did like that the E-wing pilots were Spectre numbered or whatever. Clearly inspired by the Ghost Crew, since they were the ones that helped liberate the planet and everything. The Spectre rebels. I thought Sabine's introduction was like perfect. I really hope that gets included on the soundtrack, because like her introduction being to like her listening to like alien heavy metal, it's like punk rock metal or something. It was pretty cool. I'm a big fan. It's like, it's just a weird. I just really like it whenever Star Wars makes in-universe music, diegetic music like that, and it's like in Huttese or whatever, and so it's like there's this Star Wars Galaxy's Edge album that's all the songs that they have in the cantina there, and of course I have that album and I listen to it on occasion. It's just fun to listen to. It's like, yeah, this is all a bunch of nonsense words, but it's like you can. It's so, I feel it's really good for creativity for when I write. Because it's like it helps get the creative juices flowing. It's like, okay, so in what environment would this song be playing? It's like, is this a nightclub? Is this a seedy cantina? Is this like a hunting lodge? So just really, so stuff like that I just think is really cool when it comes to Star Wars. And so Sabine speeding away from the city center and listening to this kind of punk rock music, Star Wars screamo metal or whatever it's supposed to be, and the E-wings are like, okay, you need to pull over, and she's like, nah, I'm not going to. And it's just cool. So yeah, Hewing being back is great. Of course, David Tennant. I'm always going to be happy to see David Tennant, or hear David Tennant rather. He always does an amazing job. So it's cool to see Hewing back. I hope we get some more information on what he's been up to since the Clone Wars. Hera is good. That's definitely another one. It's like Hera. I mean, Hera doesn't really do too many acrobatic type feats. It's like she may do some running, she may do some shooting, but it's like a lot of it's going to be talking and sitting and being motherly. So that's one of those, like, why couldn't you just gotten Vanessa Marshall in green makeup? It's like, was she busy? Did she not want to do it? So it kind of almost feels like, I think Mary Elizabeth Winstead is doing good in the role. I definitely get Hera vibes from her. but it does kind of feel like she's playing Hera instead of just being Hera, like Vanessa Marshall is. So I would have, that's one of those like, why couldn't you just get Vanessa Marshall to do it? But it's so, so even though I've kind of come to accept this recast thing, it's like I can kind of understand why they do it. I still have issues with it at times, as you can tell. But it's like, but the writing for the character is still so good of her. It's like of her, like trying to push Ahsoka and Sabine back together. It's like, okay, you guys were doing pretty good at something happened. I don't know what, but I'm kind of, your mother figures here, so I want to help you guys work this out and be friends again. So so she does. So it's like she's doing a good job on that aspect. I think Vanessa Marshall would have done it with a little bit more of a twinkle in her eye, or light smirk. But still definitely getting great mother vibes from Hera. And speaking on that, trying to push those two characters back together, I am very curious what the heck is going on with that, because training Sabine as a Jedi when, as of now, she's never shown any Force sensitivity. That's interesting. I mean, I suppose it's not completely out of the question that you could train someone in the Jedi arts in terms of like lightsaber stuff. It's like it's like, hey, here's what the Jedi stand for. Here's our code, and they could follow that whether or not they have the ability to harness the Force or not. But it's like, so you took Sabine as your Padawan, but she's not. So it's like, why were you, what exactly were you teaching her? I'm very, very curious about that. Because of course we saw her saber training with Kanan and Ezra back in Rebels, of course, Trials of the Darksaber, like I mentioned earlier. So, but yeah, so I don't know what's going on there. I'm very curious. I'm wondering if we're going to get a flashback or something to be what was the thing that got that started. Because I'm like, that's definitely an avenue that I would not have guessed, of Ahsoka training Sabine to be a Jedi. That's interesting. So I'm curious about where they're going with that. So yeah, that's interesting. I'm interested to see where that goes. Now, I will say, and so I've been, like I said, I pretty much, I don't have anything really that negative to say about the show so far. There's only one issue I have with it, and it's not a problem that's exclusive to this show, I don't think. It's like, why all of a sudden is it that lightsabers aren't like immediate murder weapons, and you can somehow survive a lightsaber strike all of a sudden? We saw this for the first time in Kenobi, where, of course, Reva is stabbed multiple times and manages to survive. The Grand Inquisitor, stabbed, manages to survive. And now we have Sabine getting stabbed right through the chest, or rather the abdomen, to be fair, and her surviving, where you've got this laundry list of extras and background characters and even named characters, suffering similar wounds and dying immediately. So it's like, Sabine's got some pretty strong plot armor there. So it is, it's just, I feel like it's a weird move for Filoni, who I feel like usually has a pretty good pulse on not only, of course, Star Wars and how to write Star Wars, but the fan base as well. It's like, he knows when to challenge viewer expectations and go, hey, it's like, I learned from George Lucas. I think I know what I'm doing. So here's something for you guys to mull on. It's like, he doesn't usually do something. It's like, I think there's only 2 times where it's like he's maybe strayed over the line of, it's like, you're getting some eyebrows raised at this and not everyone's going to agree with this. The first one is the World Between Worlds. That's the big one. I don't really necessarily have a problem with the World Between Worlds, because it kind of makes it clear that you can't really do time travel with it the way some people think you could do time travel with it. Because I've already seen people speculating that Ahsoka that Ahsoka is the TV show, not the character. That the show is going to use the world between worlds, and they're going to undo the sequel trilogy. It's like, can people stop thinking this, please? It's never going to happen. But I understand the world between worlds kind of rubbing people the wrong way. In terms of the storytelling, it's like, okay, well, why do you introduce this time travel thing here and then make it clear you can't use it, but then for the reasons why you'd want to use it, but then you do kind of still cheat and get away with using it the way you say you can't use it. Because Ezra straight up saves Ahsoka from being killed by Vader, and then she goes back. And because that was this whole thing with saving Kanan, is he wants to pull Kanan out of time, and Ahsoka goes, no, you can't do that because then you'll die. I guess the difference between Ahsoka and Kanan in that moment is that Kanan was saving others, where if Ahsoka died in that moment, it wouldn't have really... Well, again, it's this whole, butterfly effect ripples throughout, ripples, and because it's like, well, hold on, if she had died there, then would Ezra have been lost forever? It's or it's like, how, so judging, going by what may end up happening later in the show, it's like, how would that affect things later on? So it's like, is the only reason that it's okay for Ahsoka to have been saved in that moment is that she would need, is that, time says that she has to show up later. So the world between worlds is honestly just a big headache. And it's one of those things, it's like, it's a cool concept, but if we never touch it again, then I'm happy with that. So I kind of understand that, being... I think that's like the one other time Dave has kind of gone over the line. It's like, okay, not sure about this in terms of you writing Star Wars. But this is now the second time with Sabine being stabbed, and surviving. It's like, okay, so we're doing this again, and it's I don't understand doing that when she could have easily just lost a leg or something, and it could have had the same effect. Because I could understand if you wanted to go for the fake out, I could understand doing that like in episode 6 when you've only got 2 more episodes left in the season, and so leaving it for a week. It's like, oh, is Sabine going to survive or not? But no, they do it at the end of the first episode when we know she's going to stick around for longer, and she just wakes up in the med bay and she's fine. So it's like so it kind of just removes all the stakes from it. It's like it's like they removed the bandage or whatever, and so they've clearly already healed her, and she's just got that one little burn mark that's left. So I'm very much, and I've already seen people bouncing around with different theories of how she could survive. It's like, well, maybe the one that I saw that I could kind of maybe buy but not really is that maybe this Sith apprentice or whatever she is has a low grade kyber crystal, so it doesn't burn as hot as a traditional lightsaber. This is like a made with spare parts lightsaber, so it's not as great as other. But it's like, I don't know about that. So so it's like, can we just, it's like it would be different if we've seen stuff like this before, the last just 2 years or so, where, like, let's say Luke got stabbed in Empire Strikes Back and fell down the tube and then was rescued instead of losing a hand. And then, he's in the med bay and recovering from that. And so then ever since 1980, we have this well-established idea that you can survive getting stabbed with a lightsaber. And it's just, and so I think at that point, then, it's early enough in Star Wars as a concept, as a franchise, that people accept that, and that just becomes part of the world. But that's not, but, of course, famously, Luke loses a hand in Empire Strikes Back. And also it's like in A New Hope, Vader strikes down, but that was like at shoulder length. So it's like, if he hadn't become one with the Force and dissipated, then, he would have been decapitated. Obi-Wan would have been. We've gone, 40, 45 years or whatever 43 years, something like that, since that. And so it's like, it's been, so for almost 50 years, we've just had this, okay, you can, if it's to your extremities, yeah, fine, you can survive a lightsaber strike. But if you get stabbed or something anywhere else, then it's like, yeah, a lightsaber strike is basically fatal. There's nothing you can do about that. I mean, look at Qui-Gon and Phantom Menace. That's the one I see a lot of people pointing to, and I kind of agree with that. I'm like, yeah, that looks like that's a similar wound to a similar spot in the torso. It's like, I'm gonna need to see like an illustration of Qui-Gon Jinn next to Sabine Wren. And it's like, okay, where exactly were these wounds, and why did Qui-Gon die and then Sabine live? I think this is a little bit different than the whole force healing thing that people have a problem with from Rise of Skywalker. That to me is an easy explanation of that, since Rey was reading the ancient Jedi texts, that the Jedi Order we knew of the Clone Wars may not have had that book or something, so to speak. So maybe that wasn't really necessarily a technique they knew of. That was something that had been lost throughout the generations. That's an easy enough explanation for me. I don't really have a problem with that. But this, certain characters surviving lightsaber wounds to areas that we've previously seen them being lethal is I think it's a little bit too much of a stretch for me. And it's, and again, it's all about specifics, because it's different from Maul, who lost his lower half, but he used the Force to sustain himself through hate. And it's like, okay, he's a bad guy, whatever. That that tracks. That could work. We can accept that. And also, it's like, what they did when they brought him back was cooler than him staying dead. So even if it does kind of defy logic a little bit, it's like, what they did was so cool with it that it's fine. No one's really going to complain about the fact that Darth Maul came back, I don't think. But I don't know, Sabine being stabbed, it's like I think she should be dead, honestly. From what that wound was, it's like, I'm sorry, Sabine Wren is dead. If you wanted to have her survive a fight like that and with a wound, it's like, you needed to have her in her Beskar, or have her lose a limb. It's like, how easy would it have been for, and I don't have this character's name yet. I'm sure I'll have it down by the end of the show. But this Sith apprentice, or Darksider, or whoever she is, have her just lop off Sabine's leg, or something, and have her about to land a fatal blow, but then Ahsoka arrives. Ooh, I'm yawning. Sorry. But then Ahsoka arrives, and then she's forced to retreat and leave Sabine, on one foot or something like that. A hand maybe. I think the argument against not making her lose a hand is, of course, at the end of Rebels, we see her with what looks like both her hands. So, because of course, she does the tap on Ezra's face or whatever on the mural. So it's like, and yeah, it's like, robotic limbs with synth flesh and everything can look very realistic, but it's like, okay, so it's like, so for argument's sake, let's just make it a leg. So it's like, just have Sabine lose one of her legs. I mean, you can have her in the med bay. It could be this whole thing of, she wants to get up, but it's like this whole episode, she learns how to walk again through sheer grit and determination, and it, sets her back on the path. It's like, not that the way the episode handled it was bad, but it's like, it just further emphasizes her, okay, let's, go after Ezra. Let's help Ahsoka, even though we've had our differences in the past, and maybe pick up this training where I left off. And it's like, and losing a leg isn't that big a deal, I don't think, and it doesn't contradict necessarily what's in Rebels, because she's wearing boots and her body glove and all of her armor and everything. So it's like, you wouldn't necessarily know that she had lost a limb in that end scene of Rebels, and it doesn't contradict anything. So yeah, I do kind of have an issue with her being stabbed. But if that's really kind of my biggest issue with the show so far, it's like, I think we're doing pretty good. Chopper was perfect. His little conversation with Hera. It's like, no, Chopper, I didn't mess with your stuff. Yes, you did. It's just so good. Chopper's amazing, as always. And then, yeah, I'm just very excited to see where we go from here. Who the heck is this Marok guy? I've been seeing a lot of speculation about that. Like, there's some theories that he's Ezra that's been brainwashed to the dark side or whatever. I think that would be dumb. I hope they're not moving in that direction. Honestly, I'm gonna laugh at because I mean, to me, it seems like that Marok is the eighth brother from Rebels, and he's just not saying anything as of yet, um, because of just that design. It is so very close to that Inquisitor design from Rebels that I mean, it would not be a far leap. I mean, again, I mean, again, it just looks like a live action interpretation of that eighth brother costume from Rebels. So that's kind of what I'm leaning towards, but I don't know if he's gonna actually be. I just find it funny that every time a character shows up with a helmet, people kind of start to automatically theorize about who these about who these characters really are. It's like just because they wear a helmet doesn't mean they're anyone actually that special. This could just be a random mook that's there to be muscle for the Darksiders, and then he gets taken out in episode 4 or something. So, um, so yeah, yeah, so I'm trying to kind of just ramble this entire time, but it's like, this is the introduction to the season. We're getting started. We don't know exactly where things are. We have an idea of where things are going, but we don't know exactly where they're going. It's good so far. I guess you know Rosario Dawson again is still just fine as Ahsoka. I mean, in terms of the physicality of moving around and swinging the lightsabers during fight scenes and stuff, she's doing good there. Um, she's a little too stoic for my taste as of right now. Where and I suppose that it's supposed to be more of a she's older, she's matured, but Ashley Eckstein played her with still, and she did have a stoicness to her in Rebels with adult Ahsoka, but she did play that with a little bit of warmth in there. I feel like where Rosario Ahsoka is a little bit more cold and distant, but there may be a story reason for that. So I'm not going to really get into critiquing that too much yet. We shall see. So because again, this is only her third/fourth time because of between the episodes playing Ahsoka, because she did it in one episode of Mando and one episode of Boba Fett. So yeah, I'm not really going to critique things too heavily quite yet in terms of that. We've still got a whole 6 episodes to go, so 6 weeks. So yeah, every Friday, look forward to seeing me back here talking about Ahsoka Tano and Star Wars. Yay! So it's going to be an exciting time. So yeah. So anyway, that'll be it for this review. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching and all that great stuff. My Twitter and Instagram links are in the description below, and that will be it for this review. So, again, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.